You're like the godfather of the Tulsa comedy scene.
Well, I got into it really backwards. There's people that are clearly like, you can tell they got into this to take over.
Gotcha.
You're like, this person had a vision from the beginning that they're going to be the boss of all this shit. And for me, it was super fucking opposite, where it's like, I didn't even know I was going to be in this. I had no idea that it was going to change my life like it did, you know, and that was 10 years ago this month.
Whoa.
I'm Cody Troutman, and this is my podcast, The Cody Trout Pod.
Ladies and gentlemen, Evan Hughes, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Hey, guys.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, everyone.
The studio audience in my head.
I hear it too.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's crazy.
Good. Man, what a treat. We're back in, what would we call this event space? This is where we talk to Cepeda.
This is my friend Cody Ransom's yet unopened studio on Black Wall Street.
Awesome. Evan is, I don't know if any of my listeners, I have almost a dozen listeners. We're blowing up on all platforms.
What's up, 12?
I'm handing out mixtapes to people. In the Tulsa comedy scene, you're like the godfather of the Tulsa comedy scene. You produce the most shows. You have a vision for the community. I know you've discussed it before, but I would love, and I think some of our listeners, like maybe in Oklahoma City that don't know you as well, would love to know kind of the condensed version of the journey from starting stand-up to becoming a show producer to where you're at now. If you have a couple of like quick highlights or little morsels you want to share, I'm always fascinated by the journey.
Well, I got into it really backwards.
Okay.
I just kind of wasn't doing anything with my life, as is normal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
To not be doing shit. And I met someone that was wanting to get into it also, and she had a friend who was a current stand-up in the scene, who was a very important scene figure who was on all the shows at the time. So she was
nice.
a Looney Bin Club comic. She was on Comedy Parlor. She was on, Gerald Harris shows. She was on Billy Bazaar shows. And so when her sister was wanting to get into it, it was she had a pretty good way to get into it.
Yeah.
And so I signed up to this comedy class with her, but I had no idea that it was going to change my life like it did, and that was 10 years ago this month.
Whoa.
Oh, well, it was 10 years ago this month that I did my first set, but I think the class started in like January.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah, so the condensed version was I ended up getting in through her. Her sister took a liking to me and put me on my first bar show.
Nice.
And then I was kind of like meeting the right people, and people liked me, and then all of a sudden my life just started changing like crazy, and I was on every show pretty quickly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how soon did you start like producing your own shows?
2017, so about 2 years. I've been doing it for about 2 years, and then I just produced like one out of nowhere, just just a one-off. It wasn't. I think it's funny because I meet a lot of people in the arts world and stuff like that, and there's people that are clearly like, you can tell they got into this to take over.
Gotcha.
You're like, this person had a vision from the beginning that they're going to be the boss of all this shit. And for me, it was super fucking opposite, where it's like, I didn't even know I was going to be in this. I had people, asking me over and over and over to run my own shows because like, well, this guy knows, hundreds of, if not thousands of people.
Yeah.
Why isn't this guy running the show and bringing people to see us? Because the shows before me, there were really good ones, but there were also ones that, people weren't going to, which I mean still happens now, but it happens now more because there's like a million shows.
Yeah.
But back then it was like we could have only had 2 shows and they might still be dead because we needed to work harder at getting people to accept local comedy.
Yeah.
10 years ago. Not to say there weren't good shows before my time, and there were.
Yeah.
But it was just like the scene was so much smaller. I mean, everybody kind of knows everybody now, but everybody really knew everybody back then, like intimately. I mean, we're talking like, just a very small number of comics.
I think one thing that sets you apart, not only as a producer, but as just like a comic in the community, is a lot of comics, the only people they know are like the other comics. Mm-hmm. But you're involved in lots of different areas of entertainment, and there's like a lot of overlap between your comedic projects, your other projects, and your social life. So you have a large circle of people that are interested in what you're doing. I think that really helps the shows because from who you book to where they're at to the design of the flyers to how they're marketed, it's more than just like hey, here's the showcase of dick jokes. It's like all the lineups are balanced, have something for everybody. They're at interesting and different venues. I think the audience responds to that, which I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but have you found that to be the case?
No, and I think it's a bad idea to just be in like a bubble of like whatever your interest is. You know, like if you're interested in pro wrestling and you only talk to wrestling people and you only go to wrestling stuff, it's like I think over time that's not going to be healthy or good for you. And same thing with comedy. And I've probably like gone too far into stand up, you know, to be healthy.
Okay.
But, you know, I think I did it at least with a vision of helping other people, you know, in doing that. You know, setting up like as many shows as I do, it's a way to get a bunch of people more stage time, or the amount of stage time that I think they need to be doing this at the pace that I want them to be at. You know, I mean, I think if you only do 1 or 2 shows a month, you know, it's going to take you forever to get this good. But if if you could get on like 8, you know, that's a lot better.
Yes.
So I've tried to be the person to, like, if I need to set up 8, or if I need to set up 15, or if I need to set up 25, but we all kind of have our breaking points with stuff like that. I mean, I hope I will never set up 25 shows a month.
But so many. How many do you do now? It's still quite a bit now.
Yeah, I think it's gotten to be, I think it's like 13 or 14 or something like that. I can't really keep exact track of it. I sometimes there's like 2 in a day. In April, like I just, an hour ago set up a second show where I've already have a show on that night.
Oh, wow.
We're gonna do both.
Dude, that's cool.
So, yeah.
And are 90% of them in Tulsa, or is there like other?
Yeah, I would say 90% are in Tulsa. I've had a few opportunities to book outside of Tulsa, but I just feel like it just seems so much more unsure. Yeah. It's like I don't know anybody out there. Like there was one guy who wanted me to set one up in, I forget where we were now, like in Kansas City or something like that. It was something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if you're bringing everyone, so it's like, I cannot bring anyone. Like I can bring the comics, but that's all I'll bring because I don't know people.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to like draw a crowd because you don't know anybody there. That's something that I haven't considered since I haven't been producing my own shows before. But producing comedy shows and stand-up comedy, it's your full-time job, right?
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is that something like as you started to see some success from these shows, were you like, ooh, this could be a full-time thing, I want to get there? Or was it simply like you were talking about where it just kind of built over time and you're like, wow, I could kind of just keep doing this?
Yeah, I think like everything in my life has just been like completely unintentional. Like genuinely. Like I never have a plan for like this, I'll do this and then this will all happen. It's like I just do stuff that I think is like, this seems good. And then things happen as a result of that thing.
That's an interesting perspective because if you don't put the pressure of expectation and deadlines on yourself, you probably get to enjoy each journey a little more. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. And I think I try to focus so hard on enjoying the journey, but I think I deal with every human thing that every human goes through, where it's like you even if you're focused on happiness and you're like happiness, there's still going to be anxiety and there's still going to be fears and there's still going to be all those other things that are present at the same time. You're trying to focus on doing something good.
Yeah. Enjoying the present moment. Because that's something that before comedy, professional golf was my job. And I was never good at enjoying the present moment. I was always thinking of like the next thing. Like if I played well, it was like, okay, how am I going to sustain this or get even better? And if I played bad, it was soul crushing. So I think over time, golf, it was something that I really loved and cherished, and I poisoned it, and it became something that I kind of like resented and was a burden. And I think your perspective is really smart. I want to make sure I do that with comedy so that as time goes on, if I do get years and years into it and hopefully keep getting better, it's still just a fun thing that I get to do rather than, there's this pressure and expectation on it. So you were saying like, everything's kind of like unintentional. I think what you're saying is you're just great at being in the moment, having gratitude for what's going on, and just building one little block at a time.
Yeah, and I think if you believe in anything, like if you believe that the universe has any kind of like, this was supposed to happen kind of a thing. I mean, I don't know. I think so many times things have been just so almost eerie in my life where like this only happened because I was at this place and I only would have been there because this happened. And sometimes I just feel like I'm just like things are happening to me and I'm almost not in complete control of it.
Ooh, kind of like there's a little invisible karmic hand of the universe.
It's very weird, especially if you're like trying to pay attention to that.
Okay.
If you're like looking for it. That's one thing my partner always says. She's always like, well, if you're looking for it, you'll see it, kind of a thing. And I'm like, well, I do look for things like that.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just looking too hard.
I don't know. I think it is cool to see little things like that. You just met, her name's Lou. That was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
Thank you for talking about your journey as well. Cause I didn't know much about your early stages. So that's cool that you started and it just kind of naturally built over time. You weren't like making spreadsheets and like, I'm going to do this and this. You're just like, yeah, I want to give people opportunities on shows. And I think my friends are good and these other friends want entertainment. So there we go.
Well, and it's funny too, because I tried to make it not happen.
Whoa.
For a while. I mean, the first show that I was offered to do monthly was Heirloom Rustic Ales, and I immediately tried to give the opportunity. They were asking me to host it to another comic because I was just like, well, I don't know if I'm going to like doing that. I'd rather just be a comic because of all the drama and stuff that might come with being a producer.
Yeah.
And so I threw another comic's name out there, and she was just immediately like, well, we'd really like it to be you. And I was like, well, all right, what if I did one, and then if we hate it, that'll be it. And so one felt like very like low pressure, and I'd already done a couple like one-offs by that point. So I just figured it might be just a one-off, but it went so well, like the room filled up, and I was just like, well, this is really good.
Yeah.
So I agreed to keep doing more. And then another even bigger, large venue came to me, the Vanguard, and wanted the same thing. It was like, how am I going to turn down the Vanguard? And then once the third place comes, it's like, well, it's only 2 nights of my month. Yeah. Like I could add a third night somewhere. We'll just set it apart from the other ones. And after a while, after you do a couple, even a couple in a row, you're like, man, if I could do 3 in a row, I could probably do 4.
You're like, if I could do 4, I could probably do 13.
That's legitimately how it goes.
You said earlier, like, I hope it's not 25. We're going to do a revisit episode in 2 years, and you're going to be like, yeah, we have 27 this month.
No, my friend Casey brings that up all the time. She's like, I remember when you had like 5 shows, and you were like, I just can't picture doing any more than this.
You're going to be producing 2 shows a night every night for like a year straight.
I hate that I know you're right.
I'll be like, woo, Evan, I believe in you.
Oh, no.
You briefly mentioned Lou. That's,
yes.
So I don't know Lou as well as I know you, but seeing you guys interact, I am always struck by how warm and enthusiastic you guys' connection is. Something I love, this is so silly, I love like meet cutes. How did you guys meet, and like who made the first move? I love hearing these stories.
All right, well, I don't think I've talked about this on a podcast much, so we could deep dive into this one. Thank God. So I met her at a comedy show.
Nice.
If you're a comic, that's pretty much the only way
You just, every time I have a good set, like back when I was single, I would just like hope one attractive woman was in the audience.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, oh, please, like I just a punchline hit. Do we see any hotties out there?
With my set, though, I always thought like this set will not get me a girl, but a mutual friend brought her to a show, and it wasn't like an immediate thing. Like, oh my God, gotta lock this down. It's just like I met her at a show.
Yeah.
And then I saw her again at Sound Pony, which is another place I do a show at. And we were sitting across from each other from the Frogger Pac-Man machine. And I remember I was kind of like saying some shit, and she was laughing. And I think there was like a moment there where in my head I was like, if this girl would ever talk to me, I would talk to this girl. And I didn't usually have thoughts like that. So it's kind of like a weird, I was like, oh, it's weird, like, okay, it's a thought that I had. And I think at some point, she hit me up.
Nice.
On New Year's, and she was like, hey, you probably know, because she hadn't lived here that long. She moved here like right before the pandemic hit, but then the pandemic hit, so she didn't really get to go out and figure out things to do and all that. And so I was like, hey, I have a show that night at Blackbird on New Year's. So I invited her out to that. She came, and then I was like, hey, there's this house show that I know about that we're going to after if you want to come. She came to that. We ended up like dancing at Sound Pony. Nothing happened, like we didn't kiss or anything like that, but I ended up talking to her in DMs, and I invited her to more shows. I mean, I didn't really know I didn't know if anything's going to happen anyway. And like, I'm not
You felt a little bit of a spark, but you're not trying to like push it.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I feel like it's safer to not be pushy with stuff like that. Like if something's gonna happen, it's just gonna happen. Like that's been my kind of thing for years and throughout my life.
Comedy, dating.
I do it all the same.
Flow. Yeah.
My shows are just like my relationships.
Yeah. He's going to be shocked when he has 25.
Wow. Damn. So I'm like a poly booker.
Yeah. So you guys, there is like a vibe of definite friendship, maybe even a little bit of a romantic ember. And you invited her more stuff. It's very casual at this point. No, not romantic yet.
Yeah, but she actually didn't come to the stuff and sent like a, hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it to those or whatever. And then I just thought, well, I tried. I made it open. It didn't happen, so I didn't know. Like, hey, maybe she's not. I don't want to keep.
Gotcha.
Going. And then she came out to one of the shows like a couple months later, and I was like, oh wow, I immediately like invited her out to another thing. And she ended up sending me a message saying she couldn't come when she was like, oh yeah, I'm interested in doing that. She said she couldn't make it, but she invited me to come, see the Oscars at her place. Oh, and it was the one with the Will Smith slap.
What an Oscars to see.
I know, like the only good one.
Yeah, for real.
It's crazy. Very comedy related.
Yeah.
But so I'm out with a couple friends and I sent her a DM and I was like, hey, I just figured I should check before I bring them. I was like, can these friends come? And I gave their names. And she was like, well, I don't really have like room like that. But I thought she invited me to like an Oscar party at her place. So when I got there, it was just us. And I was like, oh,
okay.
And have you ever been in a space and you really like the person's vibe? Like, have you been to their house and you're like, I like how you can feel their energy in their place.
How they have it laid out, how they have it set up, just like I'm just going to repeat what you said back to the energy of their place.
And I had kind of like an moment where it was sort of like, I don't think I was like, I'd had a relationship end like a year more ago, and I'd kind of been like, I don't know if I can go back into one of those things, because, you know what I'm saying?
A bad breakup.
I had told all my friends that I'm like, I'm not doing another relationship, and that's just like me saying I'm only going to do 3 shows.
I'm not running 5.
Anything I say isn't true. But so I was like, like, I like this girl, and it's funny because we were so into talking that we didn't really realize like the magnitude of the slap. It both got us to look over and be like, was that supposed to happen or what's going on? We need to like look that up later because we're so into this. But it feels like our relationship feels like it started with like that feels like one of the biggest things of our generation.
Yeah,
the slap. I don't know why. It's just huge.
So I think it's because like pop culture now is very segmented. There used to be very few media pop culture outlets, so everybody kind of knew whatever they reported on. But now that it's so segmented, there's very few things that are ubiquitous, but everybody knew about that slap. So it's like one of the few uniting things.
Yeah, it feels like it's like
our parents had the moon landing, we have the slap.
It's like 9/11 or it's huge.
Yeah.
So
I will never forget when they hit the second cheek. Such a bad joke.
So I did, I kissed her eventually. Not that night.
Not that night?
It was a couple, I think we saw each other like 2 at a time. I take things very slow when you get to know the person, but it eventually very slowly. And that's kind of what I recommend for all my friends too. If any of the 12 people that are watching this are watching this purely for relationship advice, I would say take it slow. Be sure that this is the move you want to make. Because sometimes you don't have all the information either. Yeah. Like, even if it seems like, oh, this person like invited me over for this, there's some chance that they were already seeing someone. It really was just trying to get more friends.
Yeah.
Which she ended up telling me later. She was like, hey, if we had ended up just being friends, I needed that too.
Okay.
So it could have gone that direction. So, and I think that it eventually happened romantically was because I took it slow. She trusted me more because I didn't try to dive in like the first time.
Dude, that's such a good point. I think the tendency of guys is to maybe be a little over aggressive in the pursuit. And a lot of times a woman is evaluating safety first, attraction second. So the fact that you were like, listen, like we're safe, it's all good. It allowed her to evaluate the attraction and realize that you were an irresistible pillar of sexuality.
Thank you. I want to tie this into comedy too, because I realized as you were saying that, the parallels.
Yeah.
Comedy's kind of like that too, when you show up in the scene and you're immediately like, oh, it's the first night. Like, I just got here, but I want to run everything, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. It's like, people are like, slow down. We don't feel safe. You know, it's like with me, it's like, I feel like I had a natural progression of like, I'd stand up for about 2.5 years, probably. I mean, I'd have to go look at the timeline before I set up one show.
Yeah.
And then I'm just setting up a few. And I think it was like very late 2017, possibly, when I set up that first one, even at Heirloom. And then it wasn't till 2018 that I'm like running a couple where I'm like 3 years in.
Yeah.
So it's like, people have gotten used to me. They trust me, and they know I'm not, you know, just here just to do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wait to be, you know, get to the part where people are like, we want you to run for president, or we want you to run for this, rather than just like showing up and just being like, nobody asked for this, but I'm about to do all the stuff that nobody wants to happen.
Dude, that's such a great point. That's stuff I never really consider, especially because now, so I've been doing stand-up a little over 3 years. I want to produce my first show this summer. So like,
well, you did just win Othello's, Oklahoma's
that was cool.
funniest comic.
That was fun.
So I think if you've got to the point where you've won that, you're allowed to set up a show.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think that's obvious. But,
okay. That's, you know what? That's a good, I like
yeah.
that.
But if anybody questions your stripes, you'd be like, hey, fucking won this contest.
Yeah.
I'm the boss now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Past winners include Cepeda Cheeks.
Cepeda Cheeks. Shout out Cepeda Cheeks.
Dude.
Definitely one of the goats.
Yeah. He's awesome. Man. Okay. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about. So since you've run so many shows, 25 a month at this point.
God, it feels like it.
There must have been some that, or maybe none, but I would assume there was at least one show that had been a total disaster. I would love to hear a story about a disaster show, a funny disaster show, then what you learned from it.
Does it have to be one that I ran?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. Because you can learn a lot. I think true wise people learn from watching the failures of others. So if you watch something that was a disaster and you learn from it, I would love to hear the story.
I think I may have told this story before on a podcast, maybe a long time ago. But
originality's
I've
gone.
done, you know, you know, it's kind of a good story. But so this was a show years ago in Arkansas. And this is a story about it being my fault too.
Okay.
So we drive out to Arkansas, which is like several hours. We get there and like, this has happened. I mean, we've all run shows where you walk in and there's like 8 people, you know, so there's no shade being thrown here or anything, but we get there and we're like, oh, let's wait and see if some more people show up. So we take like an hour and then like 4 people leave. We're like, better get this thing started.
That's so funny.
All comics get it. All comics get it.
That's so funny.
And then so like we're outside. I think, comics are smoking or something like that. And there's like a scuffle. There's something happening in the parking lot. There's like words are being exchanged and stuff like that. And this is fucking horrible. But like, I guess a man in Arkansas had hit a woman in this fucking parking lot.
Oh no.
And one of our audience members was out there like consoling, taking care of the situation, stuff like that. And then like, the comics are like, hey, let's wait till this clears up before we start. And it's like, this is just absolute, like, this is like nightmare scenario, right? Like, you can only imagine.
Two of your 4 audience members are now fist fighting in the parking lot.
Exactly. And so I'm hosting this thing. So I get up and I'm like, this was like a big learning lesson to me. I'm trying to think how new I was at the time. I was probably like a year and a half in or something like that. And so I get up there and I start trying to, I'm like, referencing the parking lot thing, but then I realized that it was like the way I'm doing it is like I'm trying to do comedy, but I'm trying to like I just don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I'm mentioning that, and like you could tell I looked at the faces in the front row and they thought I was like making light of it, and I'm like, no one here knows who I am. It's not like I'm like, oh, that's just Evan. It's like you need to be really careful and you need to make sure that like the crowd, when you get up there, they don't know who you are. Maybe come across as a good person first, and that was like a real learning lesson to me, because I'm like trying to do my jokes. After that, I realized I'd already fucked up, and like they're like, we're not gonna laugh at anything you say. It was like the worst bomb, like one of the worst bombs I'd had to that point, I think. And then like the comic that closed out the show, DeMario, he just killed for like an hour straight. So it wasn't like a bad room. I mean, he killed to like 5 people for an hour straight. Yeah. But I'm just like dying inside. So I'm like, it's going to be a long car ride home. So there's that story.
That is a great, funny, and learning story.
There was
I think that's something we've all learned the hard way, where it's like you see a professional comic do something and you're just like, oh, I'll do that. Like, you know, going up and making a joke about a fight in a parking lot. But if they don't know you and they don't have any relationship with like your type of humor, they have to know you're coming from a safe place before they're going to laugh at you making like a joke about the violent parking lot episode.
Yeah.
That's such a good point.
Yeah. And I remember, I think I was just like fucking nervous and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, okay, Arkansas, you got violence against women, you know, and they're just looking at me like, and I'm like, okay, weird way to start the show. I wish I could take all of this back. Like this shouldn't have happened.
Oh yeah. That's tough. I've been there too, where I'll say like a riff about something in the room and I'll realize like, ooh, that's going to hurt. And then for like the next 5 minutes, you're just like trying to dig your way out of like this one.
But when you're that new too, I mean, even now, it's like at some point, it's like there's not a big enough shovel.
That's so true.
But like I think where I was at the time, I certainly didn't have the tools to get myself out of that. You know,
you had like the little Tykes plastic shovel. It's just gravel. You're just like, all right, I need a pickaxe. Yeah. Man, that's funny. Is Arkansas where the Black Apple comedy shows are? Okay, yeah, I've seen. I think Cepeda did one of those recently. I saw that.
Yeah, Black Apple's great. It's like Stetson Banks, Steph Bright, and some other friends and stuff. It wasn't there. It was like a restaurant.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I applied for that Big Diamond Festival.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Rob Stresh, yeah, he's one of the best.
That would be so. Hopefully we get in there.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask about, man, I hope some of these questions are original. We had one original with Lou. Future goals. Are you wanting to just kind of keep building in Tulsa, keep doing what you're doing? You kind of touched on this earlier. You know what? I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to guess your answer. So, future goals. Do you want to produce more shows in Tulsa? Are you wanting to be more of a performer? Are you wanting to expand into other markets? My guess would be you're just taking it one day at a time, doing what you're doing. Whatever the universe karmically feeds you, you will respond to.
That's 100% true. Because I do think, like, I think I've told a lot of people that I would like to stay in Tulsa for the long haul. You know, as long as I'm alive, I want to be here. But I think there's scenarios that could come up in your life where it's this sort of thing where it's like if you were presented an opportunity that was the sort of opportunity where, like, even all of your friends and family would be like, you need to go do this.
Yeah.
You know, like things like that. And you can never say that something like that couldn't ever happen because you don't know. You know, things like that could happen. Or maybe things here could change so drastically that maybe people wouldn't really want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I think we've seen places like Nashville's radically changed, Austin's radically changed. Yeah. Like, we don't know if we could radically change, you know, and maybe a direction that's not the best.
That's a good point.
So, but, you know, my plan right now is to be doing what I'm doing here and being here for, you know, if there is like sort of like something that's not great that kind of tries to like take over our scene, I want to be there and try to like battle against that, you know, and try to keep things good here.
That's very noble. I like that. So if something like that did occur and you had to do battle against it, would your style be more like aggressive, like no, or like, hey, I'm going to just be the shining example of how things should be done and let people respond to that?
Well, I think it's tough to just, you know, if we have existing relationships with all of these venues and business owners and things in the community, it would be hard for someone to completely come in and upend all of that.
Yeah, that's true.
Although we've seen it happen. I mean, it's if they come and they put all of their money into buying something so massive that it changes the culture that it exists.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. A friend of mine told me a story a long time ago about people like kind of leaving their community sometimes too soon, just trying to chase something. Like, well, he's in the hip hop community, and he told me a story about like years and years ago when Texas rap really took off, and it was like Paul Wall and Chameleon and Mike Jones, stuff like that. He was like, I got to get the hell out of Tulsa and get on this. So he left Tulsa to go down there and try to jump on, but there was really no room at the table because everyone that had already been there were in all of those spots, and they were like, we're not really looking for every outsider to come in and, you know, jump on the bandwagon of what we've built here.
Oh, yeah.
And I think just trying to like leave your community to run to the trend isn't always going to work for you. I mean, I think if you have like a talent that's like, you know, so generational, like if you're a generational comedic talent, it's like you need to go to Chicago or LA or New York and like just show people that talent you have. But I don't think, you know, just going to like whatever's hot, like, oh, I'm just going to go get in line over here. You know, it's like that. I don't think that always works.
We got a lot of guys in OKC that drive down to sign up for Kill Tony all the time.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, I've never been to Austin. I mean, it'd be cool to go and do some shows there, but I don't have like a huge interest in just driving down to like sign up for a bucket pull. Cause I like you said, I think especially with the internet, you're able to build in places you weren't able to build before. Like leveraging social media, leveraging kind of the, like, you know, I can have my own cameras and podcasts now. You know, not too long ago that wasn't the case. You needed some sort of like media company backing. So I like what you said about building within your own community. And I'm sure those like Texas rappers, they had to build from the ground up. So like the guy that went from Tulsa to Texas, their place was probably like Tulsa at some point, where it's like, hey, the scene doesn't really exist here. Let's try to build it.
Well, and also, you know, and I think it could be smart, or there's nothing wrong with like going there for a week or going there for a weekend, because that's just a vacation.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're going there just for some memories or to like try something or screw around, it's like not that different than me like going to spend a week in Tennessee or something like that. It's just, you know, that's not the same as like moving there and trying to like, oh, this is the only way that I'm going to make it, is this avenue, you know, when everybody else is everybody's trying to get through like one doorway at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, but I think if you just want to like have some cool life memories and stuff, and you want to like go down there and sample that and see what's going on, and you can say, hey, you know, 30 years from now, you could be like, man, when this was going on, like in the 2000s or whatever it is, I was like, you know, in 2025, I was in line for 3 hours at this thing. It's the same thing as like I was at Woodstock.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's just a bizarre social thing that's going on right now that won't be going on forever.
That's true. I did that about a year ago. I went and did like a small run of shows in New York City. I had a buddy up there that let me stay with him. I just hit up a bunch of producers and managed to like get on a few shows just to see. I was like, what's, you know, the best scene in the world? What are these comics like? How do they approach the shows? And the amazing thing was I was doing shows for 15 people in the back room of the dirtiest bar you could imagine. And hearing the credits of all the comics on the show, it was, I'm not kidding. So the host did his time. He brought up somebody and he's like, hey, they got to run because they're on at the Comedy Cellar in 45 minutes. They write for The Daily Show. They've done this thing. Give it. And you're like, whoa. And then it's me like, this guy is from Oklahoma. And then the next person after me, like this person was on Netflix's The Stand-Ups, and they write for this comedy show on Hulu. This person's an SNL writer. And I was like, holy shit, we're all doing this show for $20? Like it was really amazing to see the depth of skill they have. And so I think like what you were saying is to go and experience it is different than like leaving your own community. But I'm glad I did that because it was kind of a rude awakening of like, dang, I got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stuff I would imagine is just normal out there. Like if you're out there, it's like everybody you meet is like, oh, they're a writer for the show or something.
Yeah,
like
probably.
It's not as crazy as it is to us.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It felt crazy. I was like, wow, that guy's writing for SNL. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm from Oklahoma.
There's a Tulsa comic that writes for SNL.
Oh,
Stephen Castillo.
Yes, I was gonna say I think I've seen his stuff on Instagram. He does now he has an original podcast. I've seen some of his stuff. He's pretty good. I just basically listened to all your previous podcast appearances, and I wanted to ask the same questions that everybody else did. Okay, in this portion, I want to get a little more philosophical. So, your kind of journey through the scene. You went from like newer comic, producing a couple shows. Now you produce a lot of shows. Do you ever feel that people treat you differently based on kind of like what you do and what you might be able to offer them versus just as a person? Because I think we all encounter that a little bit, but I'm curious, like you said, some of the drama that comes with being a show producer. Have you experienced much of that? And kind of some people can be a little, maybe two-faced is the wrong word, but there are some transactional relationships out there.
Well, I think the perception of you changes. I think in the way that, like, I was thinking about this the other day where I was at dinner with someone and they were like, oh yeah, I met this guy who's a doctor and it's like his whole personality or whatever. And I was like, well, I mean, it kind of makes sense if you're doing something, maybe 50 hours a week. And then it's like, you've got to think about it and talk about it and stuff like that. And the way people treat you, where you tell them like, okay, I'm a writer for the Daily Show, or I'm a firefighter, or I'm a lawyer or whatever. It's kind of like people treat you like whatever it is that you do is part of how people treat you.
Okay.
And so I think it's a little bit like unavoidable. Like, I mean, I think when I was just a comic versus like a producer with a whole bunch of like real estate, rooms.
Yeah.
People treat me differently. And I think it's kind of changed a little bit of my mind state. A little bit because of that, but I mean, only as much, I've avoided that as much as I can, but I think it's not completely avoidable to have, you can't have nothing change.
It's true.
So but I think one of the good things about it is I think I got through like the hardest part of that transition, just because so many of the people that start now accept that they've started like so much after me that they're like, well, it makes sense. Like he deserves this because he's been here.
Gotcha.
I think it's rare that people start now and they're like, why is Evan blah, blah, blah. It's like, you're like, well, he's been doing it a long fucking time.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense.
Yeah. It's kind of like,
and I've tried to be fair about things. I mean, I think I'm not like, I think as like a producer, I've tried to do as best I can with it. Like in terms of like, I've often thought about like how people are treated in different, like if you ever thought about like having a job somewhere and like your boss is like, you do something wrong and your boss is like, hey man, don't do that again.
Yeah.
Like I've never had someone get off stage no matter what they did, literally no matter what they did, and like said something like pointed to them about it. You know what I mean? So I kind of just like treat everybody in what I think is like how I would want to be treated, especially being a comic myself and having done stand-up years before I hosted a show. It's like, I wouldn't want to be talked to like this. Like I understand that it's a really vulnerable art form, and you could feel like if I feel shitty about their set, they probably feel way more shitty than I feel. Man, so it's like, that's a good point. It's like maybe you want to have your person in the position I am be someone that's like a comic rather than just like dealing with someone that, hey, this is just some fucking businessman that doesn't even understand what the fuck we're doing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I get it. Like if people aren't laughing or you said something you shouldn't have, like, I get it. I have that story too.
Damn, that's really well said. So if you're producing a show and a comic on stage either does something inappropriate or something unacceptable, how do you address it? Do you address it at all or just not book them anymore? I would hope there was like maybe a middle ground of like being able to talk to him like, listen, I think there's a better way that we could have done that. I don't want to blacklist you. Or is it kind of like a zero strike policy for some stuff?
I think if I talk to him about it, I'd like to talk to him about it in real life, because I think conversations like that should be in real life and not just like in a text. Like I'd hate to like load up like a big paragraph or two about something that happened at a show and send it and just hope that it reads the way I would want to put it in my voice.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to write that well enough. Like I would like to sit down with them, but I think just really not booking them is probably the way I've done it, where it's like, but it has to be something kind of extreme. I mean, I think if someone says something like transphobic or says something racist or does something so egregious that it's like, I don't think I should have to have a conversation with them about that. It just kind of like makes sense that you're not on the call list anymore.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And it also like, we don't have like a fucking contract or anything. Like you're not my employee or anything. I just asked you to do a show and I'm probably not going to ask you back over. I mean, the same thing is like if you had a house party and they came over and did something fucking crazy at your party, it's like, yeah, well, next time we do a party, it's like, bro, do not invite him.
Yeah.
That's
a good point.
Yeah.
What about if a comic you saw like they really were trying to do a good job, but it just like wasn't going good? Do you ever give advice or kind of share experience that you've been doing it a long time, or are you kind of like, listen, like a lot of these lessons you just got to learn on your own. Keep at it.
That's a great question. Like really, for me, it's been really begrudgingly. Like for years, I would never ever say anything, and then I think it kind of got to a point where it was like, under certain circumstances, it might help to offer some like constructive, but also let them know like, I'm not saying this in a way like, oh, I really know better, and or that there's even like really a right way. Because one thing you'll find in comedy is that like, if someone tells you that something won't work, like someone out there is doing it like that and making it work.
Yeah.
You know, where people will be like, don't wear this on stage, or don't do it like this, or don't host like this, or you never want to have this be your closer. And it's like, believe me, someone probably did it on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, I don't know what to tell you, but like people have to realize that their advice in comedy is like, has to be like very specific and could be wrong.
Yeah.
So, I'm really careful with what I tell people, especially because this is a good example too. Sometimes someone could be doing it the wrong way for a while, and then they kind of turn a corner with that thing they're doing. Like maybe they're doing some kind of like thing where they're like super fucking loud or super fucking quiet, and like that thing isn't working for them. But then they do it long enough that they kind of figure out they figure out another element to it. So comedy a lot of times is an intersection of like a lot of different things that you're doing together, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's like kind of like the way you carry yourself, or like the types of jokes versus your body language. You know, there's so many different types of things, and that thing might start working for them. So sometimes I worry about like messing with something that could become a thing. Like I sometimes think of comics as almost like this, similar to like bands or rappers or whatever, however you want to say it. But some of the best bands are nothing what you think a band would be like.
Yeah.
You know, like this isn't what music should be, but then it's like the most popular thing and it becomes a whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think with comedy could be like that too. I mean, I'm sure even someone like Casey Rocket, at some point, someone probably told him that he should try to not do that.
Yeah.
You know, and all of a sudden it's like, if he had listened to them, he wouldn't be Casey Rocket.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to be careful with bad advice like that, telling someone to be a more normal comic.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring him up, because two things that stood out from what you were saying is a quote that I love. I love a lot of cheesy quotes. A quote that I love is, different isn't always better, but better is always different. Which basically means that to get better, you have to be different than what you're currently doing. And sometimes it's not going to work. But if you keep doing the same thing, you'll always be stuck where you're at. So if you keep trying different things, eventually you'll find something that's better. But it does take some of those bitter failures of something really not working to figure it out. And I was actually going to cite Casey Rocket specifically because before he blew up, he did some shows in Oklahoma. And I was lucky enough to be there, and we got to spend some time together. Then at the Blue Whale Festival, we got to like go out to eat together and stuff. I'm not like claiming a friend, just like lucky enough to have some conversations with him, and just got to ask him a little bit about his style. And he told us like, yeah, I was bombing horribly for years in tiny rooms and nobody understood what I was doing, but I just was like going to make this style work. And he said he started as like a one-liner comic.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, he said he used to do one-liners with no act-outs. And then over time, I don't know what the change was, but maybe somebody took him aside and said, listen, this isn't working. Let's saws it up a little bit. But
yeah, I've seen some radical changes from local comics before, from like where they started to the style that they kind of morphed into.
Yeah.
But I really haven't been the one very often to like give people like little like notes and shit like that. Like it's very rare for me.
Okay, now some of the questions that I had on here, these are more philosophical. You can take them any direction you want. I just think these are great questions. And I'll just ask a couple, and if you're like, I don't have anything, we'll move on. But if you have something, I would love to hear it. We'll start with a fun one. What is the hardest you've ever laughed?
Oh, shit.
Doesn't even have to be at stand-up, just a time that you remember.
It definitely wasn't.
Yeah, nobody's that good.
Oh, man. I have no idea. I was probably a kid.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true. No, laughing like a kid is
Man,
a
it's like
skill.
the first time you ever like figured out comedy as a kid or something. God, imagine like, you know, now like kind of like a very basic joke premise, but imagine the first time you ever heard that.
Yeah.
You're like, holy fuck. Like I thought it was this, but it was this. Like the first time that ever hit your brain.
The first joke you ever hear, you're like, oh.
Where you figured it out. You're like, oh shit.
I have vague memories because like I think a common question like people ask each other in is like, what made you start stand up? A lot of people have like really interesting stories. Mine is very basic. I just wanted to be funny my whole life and I wasn't. And I was like, if I go to where people are trying to figure out how to be funny, eventually I will learn it too. Because in high school and middle school, I tried so desperately to be funny and was not. Like I have vivid memories of like in conversation trying to be funny and just falling so flat. And then once I had figured out how to like tell a joke a little bit, vivid memories of telling a joke in conversation and people laughing and being like, holy shit, it's happening. Yeah. I did one. And
That's amazing.
So Hardy's favorite probably as a kid. Let's see. What is your proudest moment? Besides being on the Cody Trout pod, which is the crowning achievement of your career.
Damn, I was going to say this.
Without question.
Shit, these are hard.
These are fun.
Because they're so extreme.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the biggest this, the biggest that. I
just like the human experience fascinates me.
Gosh, that's so... Oh, I know. It probably would have been in the last 10 years too, because it probably would have been during my comedy runs. So I'm like, I've got it kind of narrowed down. I'm like, I don't know, man. I think sometimes too, I think pride isn't usually like the emotion. You know what I mean? I know that's probably comes across as weird too, but like, I think sometimes what's the other one that's not pride where you feel like a satisfaction and like.
Satisfaction.
Yeah, satisfaction.
Contentment, maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe pride is one of those things that I've actively tried to like push down. Like pride's bad.
Interesting.
And I think that's why I don't get it as much.
I would say pride and proud are different though. And maybe just in my head, like pride is kind of like a conceit, but proud is just like an internal, hey, I put a lot of work into this, or I tried really hard at this and it went well, and that makes me feel good, regardless of how I'm perceived. I
think I have a good feeling from a show where I feel like, this goes back to we've talked a lot about like comedy booking and stuff like that on the pod, but you know, one thing with comedy shows that you book is often you'll put it in the wrong order. And then you won't really realize it till later in the show. And you're like, oh, maybe this person shouldn't have been first, or this person should have closed it, or whatever. Those things are just going to happen. But there have been shows where literally every single person was like the perfect person to book for the show, and the order was perfect, and everything was just like, those are the ones where I have felt like a perfect contentment of like, it does feel like a culmination of all of my experience and how hard I've worked to try to laser my focus in on like, who will be good for this, and like when do they go up, and when do we start this, and all of those things is like, it's not just random, you know, or it's like, it's not just something that anyone could do. It comes from a lot of experience in booking shows, but even with all my experience, I could still set it up wrong, you know. But the ones that do go off perfectly, I do feel a great deal amount of satisfaction and like,
good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe pride's the wrong word, but like that satisfaction of like you put a lot of effort into something and you have really high hopes for it. So there's like a vulnerability to it that when it does go well, you're like, yes, that yes, but great answer. Wow, what a well navigated question there. Wow, this is incredible. Let's see. We touched on this from a comedic standpoint, so if there's nothing you want to add to it, we can move on. But I'm curious, what would you consider to be your greatest failure? And what did you learn from that? So I think learning from...
Oh, fuck.
Learning from failure is really important and really hard. I think it's very easy to, like, when things go wrong in your life, to look out and be like, oh, this, and this circumstance kind of prevented me from achieving what I wanted. But it's harder to be like, dang, I let myself down. I can go first if you don't want to be like.
Yeah, why don't you go and
Okay.
I'll go.
Yeah, just so you're not like,
Yeah.
let me tell you about where I fucked up. I would say my greatest failure is slightly more abstract. It's not like a single event, but would be professional golf. Like from the time that I began, I would say that I want to embody some of the qualities that you have, because from like when I start anything, I start putting the pieces together of what's this going to look like 20 years from now. And I think that can be destructive. So from the time I started golf, I started late. I started when I was 13. Most kids that like want to play for serious, they start earlier. I only started because I broke my elbow, so I couldn't play like baseball or football anymore. And my mom was like, "We got to play something." And the doctor's like, "We can play golf." So I just walked onto the golf team in 7th grade, and I was as horrible as you could be. I was terrible. I had no talent for it, but I just thought being a professional athlete was cool. Decided I'm going to go for this. I'm really making this a long answer. Basically, invested over a decade of my life into this thing. And it sounds just so silly to even say out loud, but I wanted to be the best player in the world. Like from the time I was 16 years old, even when I was still terrible, I was like, I want to be the best player in the world. So every day I approached it with the mindset of like, I'm going to be the best player in the world. Then I started to get injured a lot. And instead of kind of let's exist in the present, take it day by day, I pushed recovery timelines too far. I didn't rest and recover the way I should have on a day-to-day basis or for injury layoffs. So like I pushed back surgeries back sooner than I should have, pushed wrist surgeries back sooner than I should have. And it all culminated in I was playing in Southeast Asia on the Asian Developmental Tour, was the professional tour I was on. And I would wake up in the morning and I couldn't open and close my hand. And it would take me like hours of like, I would have to put it in like warm water and massage it. And it would take me hours to even be able to like grip the club. And like my back would like, I would wake up in the middle of the night. Like if I moved in the middle of the night, I would get like these shooting pains, like down around my leg, up through my shoulder and down my arm, just because I had these injuries that I wasn't taking care of. Again, I'm explaining this way too much, but to ultimately have to retire from golf was a crushing failure, because not only had I invested all this time into it, you know, it's like your whole identity. You know, my parents really believed in me. My peers really believed in me. My college and high school teammates believed in me. And like coaches and friends believed in me. So to not even be playing anymore is something that like I think about every day, and it brings me like a crushing sense of despair. But what I learned is that not everything in life is exactly under our control. Like I thought if I put in these inputs, I will get these outputs guaranteed. There's just a lot of variables. And I think learning to adjust to those variables and like take it one day at a time, rather than have like when I first started, I have this vision of where I think things should be, and I'm just going to force everything into this like vision, rather than like, okay, as you learn and grow from experience, that needs to change. So I would say, you know, 13 years of my life to learn a basic lesson, not my best trade, but I did learn a lot from it.
Did you see the Tiger Woods hard launch post on Instagram recently?
I did.
That was amazing. Did you see the caption?
I don't remember word for word, but I did read the caption.
It's so funny because he's like, it's such a bad photo of them. Like it looks like it's at like a golf, you know, work event or something, like for him with her there, and like they don't really look good. And then the caption is like, I'm so happy, you know, he's like hard launching his girlfriend in the post, but then he's like, I'd like to ask you for your respect and privacy at this time. Where it's like, you just don't post it then.
Yeah.
You're like, what are you doing? Like, it's so odd. But also like with his history of cheating and stuff, you wonder if it's sort of like connected to that in some way. It's like, all right, y'all, stay out of my shit. You know, it's like, yes, I got one of these.
Don't tempt me.
Yeah, I might fuck this up, but stay off my ass.
Hose, quit hitting me up. I do not have the willpower.
Yeah.
Please stop. I bet it was like, you know, he didn't want to post it, but maybe the girlfriend is like, I need to be made public, and you need to tell these hoes to lay off. So he posted, and he's like, please respect my privacy. Hoes, leave me alone. I'm just trying. I'm 50 now. I got to lock something down. this is the last 30-year-old blonde chick I'm gonna get.
That's exactly how it seemed. It was like, but it's also one of those things like, careful what you wish for. It's like, don't ask him to do it if it's gonna be that bad.
Yeah.
Like maybe you don't want this hard launch once you see it.
So true. That reminds me of another hard launch I saw on Instagram recently. So back when I was single, I spent a lot of time with this woman. I won't identify her or anything because she's great. I have no hard feelings whatsoever. I was interested and I was pursuing it. I thought she was interested as well, but I couldn't quite, kind of like you were saying, I didn't quite know the vibe. And then one night she invited me over at like 11 p.m. to fix her stove. And I was like, I know what this is about. I show up, her stove's broken. So I fixed her stove and she was like, whew, thanks. Well, I got to get to bed for work. And I was like, oh, wow, I misread this situation so poor. So I was embarrassed. So I just like stopped hitting her up. But then she would reach out to me and ask me to do things consistently, like just the two of us. And I was like, I really cannot figure this out. And then she would invite me as her date to certain events. And I was like, I'm really confused. So then eventually after we've gone on, like, I tried to kiss her and she was like, whoa, I thought we were friends. And I was like, I am double embarrassed. I cannot figure this out. And so I told her, I was like, listen, I was interested in you. You're clearly not interested in me. Let's just stick to hanging out in groups because I can't decipher when we're hanging out one-on-one at 1 a.m. at your apartment. It's hard for me to figure out like I was so confused because I couldn't figure out what her intentions were, and I was just very confused. And I said, listen, she's great, but I just don't understand. And so recently she posted a picture of her new relationship on Instagram with a woman. I was like, oh, that's why I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was disqualified from the beginning.
Damn.
So that was that. I thought that was
that's a good story.
Interesting. And yeah. I actually didn't even see that she posted it. One of my friends sent it to me, and they were like, "Bro, you never had a chance." So, and her and I haven't spoken in a long time. This was a long time ago, but I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, did you have a failure story you want to share, or do you want to jump to a different question? We have a couple others we could.
Yeah, I think. It's funny. I think my big relationship before my one now, I thought when that one fell apart, I remember feeling like at the time like it was like a big, failure on my part, or something like I'm going to have to tell everyone and then people are going to be like, you couldn't make that work. But I mean, everyone was so cool about it. And I think there's a lot of people that haven't had like a big, I mean, now I'm kind of like in Tulsa, I'm like a public figure in Tulsa. And not everybody is, but it's like if everybody kind of knows your business, like if you've posted the person and you have a big like local following or something like that, everyone's going to ask you about it.
Yeah.
And I was kind of dreading that, but everybody was so much more cool than I thought. But I remember having like a lot of anxiety about it at the time, just because I was like, oh, this is this thing I've kind of like worked on over the years and is like built up and have like made public. Yeah. And now I have to tell people, and people are probably going to be like, you couldn't make that thing work, it was like a failure on my part.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't like that, I don't know, that I changed the way I looked at it after that.
Yeah.
But I remember having like, a bad month there before I got my head wrapped around things.
Yeah. Breakups are really hard. I'm really glad that your friends in like the local community was like warm and supportive.
Oh yeah.
That's a really nice surprise of human nature sometimes.
Yeah.
They can rally around you a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody just starts to it's like fears that you built up that are like unfounded.
Yeah. That's a great point about human psychology. I think a lot of the fears that we have in life are things that aren't exactly real. It's just kind of the unknown that, at least for me anyways. Okay. 2 more. You know what? I'll ask this one first. When was the last time you cried?
Ooh. Oh man. I feel like there was a movie. I rewatched The Wrestler
with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, and I teared up at the end.
Okay, I've only seen that movie once. Does he die at the end?
Well, should we be spoiling it? What if these?
I think it came out in like 2009. All right. Dozen listeners, go pause this, watch The Wrestler, come back.
Okay, so it's very Sopranos. It cuts to black with the implication that he died.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a powerful movie.
But Marissa Tomei is there, and it's sort of like, just go with her, bro. Like, she's right there.
Oh,
you know, and he's like, nope, I'm gonna go die in the ring.
Oh God.
I was like, whew.
It's like
man, someone cutting onions in here.
Yeah. Did you watch it by yourself?
No, with my partner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Sometimes I'll cry more at movies by myself than I will with other people.
Really?
I'll let myself.
No, I cried. Quite a few. I think Shawshank Redemption. I cried in front of her.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, that was kind of like, I think it's like happy tears though.
Yeah.
So I can go either way. I can cry because I'm doing well. I can cry because I'm not.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, Shawshank Redemption. I think when Red walks towards Andy on the beach and they run and embrace as the credits roll, and
it's so much.
the Pacific is as blue as
they don't make movies like that anymore.
I know.
It's so fucking good.
What's sad is that movie bombed at the box office even in its own day. And it only was successful because of great DVD sales over time. Was the only reason it like kind of became like a hit over time.
That movie's amazing too because it feels like the ending of it is so like painstakingly like thought out, and it's obvious that like if you watch the ending of that movie, you know that they didn't just think of that in like one sitting.
Yeah,
it's like you had to think about it. Probably, you know, I don't know. You can see the work that went into making that ending perfect, and I feel like for so long it's been a trend to just like, here's just somewhere to just end it and let the audience figure it out, and it's like it's sort of this like having a restaurant where it's like, we'll just put out the ingredients, like make your own sandwich. You know, it's like, but aren't you the artist? Like, you know, and I think watching that movie, it was just so like, they don't make the audience do the work.
It's interesting you say that because an unpopular opinion I've had for a long time, so many movie buffs push back on me, is that I don't like ambiguous endings. Like, listen, if I wanted to write the end of a movie, I'd just write a movie. You got the $100 million budget. You got the Hollywood A-list actors. Tell your damn story. Don't make me guess what happened. You tell me what happened. I'll decide if I like it or not. You tell me what happened. Don't be like, you know, hey, it's however you thought. You know, I couldn't figure it out. So I totally agree. Maybe even, but yeah, I don't like ambiguous endings. Even if it's an ending that is not what I wanted, it's like, tell your story. Tell me how you were going to do it. And if I thought I could do better, then hey, that's on me to go make a movie.
Well, I think the problem is, and I think Sopranos is a good example where it's like, it is the perfect cut to black. It's like done for a reason, and it was genius. But I think so many people saw that and they were just like, we can do the cut to black too. We'll just do it over here. You know, and it's like, not everyone can do the cut to black. You know, and it's
so
like
they used it intentionally. Some people are using it as kind of a cop out.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to an interview about pro wrestling, which I'm a big wrestling fan. But a lot of times wrestling, you know, there's a lot of parallels to wrestling and comedy and relationships and movies and all that stuff. In the interview, the wrestler was saying that like Shawn Michaels, a lot of people watched the way he worked his matches and the way he worked his character, and they copied it. You know, in terms of like doing all the high flying stuff that he did, like flipping around the ring and stuff like that. They're like, oh, we want to be like Shawn Michaels. And it's like, Shawn Michaels didn't just flip and flop all around the ring. He had like a reason for why he did it. And it was part of the psychology. And it was like, he was doing so much more than that, but people watched it. And that's like, they only saw the part that they wanted to see, and they ripped off the part they wanted to rip off. You know, what they thought was like the fun part of it. And that happens a lot with like everything, you know, with movies, with TV, with music, where it's like, this is kind of like inspired by this, but they're only doing like the one part or the easy part. And that's why it sucks. And
it becomes a cheap imitation that lacks the depth of what the original concept had.
Because they didn't fully understand, you know, it's like people could rip off The Sopranos, you know, cut to black, but they don't fully understand why they did it. Like there was so much thought put into why they're doing the cut to black. The way they did it. Like it was a very well thought out ending. It wasn't just like, it doesn't just mean you can end your movie whenever, which you can, but it's like, we'll, as someone watching it, we'll go, yeah, they pretty much just ended this wherever. Yeah. You know, we can tell, you know.
That's, man, well said. All right, last question, and then I will let you get out of here. This might be, you could take this in any direction, big or small. What is your greatest fear? It could be like a wild animal or just a concept. It's a toss-up between a jackalope and failure.
Man, life is so funny. I feel like I look at it's funny talking about, we're always having to talk about what other people are doing in relation to what we're doing, or talking about what we're doing. I feel like even with what we were talking about earlier, where we're kind of speculating on, should these people be going to Texas? Should these people be going to New York? Should people be staying here? And it's sort of like, I think we're all living with the anxiety of like, are we choosing the right one? Are we moving when we shouldn't have? Are we staying here when we shouldn't have? Yes. And I think ultimately we just need to focus on, whatever makes us happy and whatever we can live with. It's like, not only is there, door 1, door 2, door 3, sometimes there's like 800 doors, and that can give you anxiety. But I think if you find what's making you happy, I mean, I think one thing, when I was at my most depressed, I remember I was working at this really shitty call center, not knowing what I was going to do with my life. And I remember like being on a call, and like my brain started thinking about like how depressed I was. And I was like, my birthday was like 3 months away. So this would have been in like February of 2011 or something like that.
Okay.
And it was like, my birthday is in May. And I was like thinking about like what I would do for my birthday that year. And I was like, and I've seen people like, sometimes if I see someone posting online about like how fun something's going to be in, 3 months from now or something, it gives me that same kind of feeling of like, they might be very depressed. Cause I remember I was, because at any time it's like that thing in where you're like, I'll be happy once I get this job, or once I'm a paid comic, once I'm on, Hulu, I'll be happy. Yeah. It's like, so you've basically just decided to not be happy for 2 years. Like, I'll be happy when I'm over there. It's like, you need to be happy here and here and here and here and here, or you're probably not going to be happy all the way over there.
That's a great point.
And people often, when they do end up getting the thing that they worked for, then they're like, shit, I'm still not happy.
Yeah, it's just another thing.
It's just,
it's like the green light in The Great Gatsby. I don't know if you've ever read that book or seen that movie, where it's like he's always reaching for something. Like, and if you're always reaching for something, you'll never be happy. Even if you get that thing, you'll always be reaching for something else.
Yeah.
Well, so like I thought you made your remark you said about like the anxiety of, we have so many options. What's the right one? I agonize over that as well. Yeah. I relate to that.
Yeah, and I think I was trying to say that like you need to be happy no matter what door you're choosing, or even if you're choosing no doors.
Yeah.
Because if you let that anxiety eat at you about, am I doing the right thing or am I not doing the right thing? I think that's something that you could just constantly live with, because we're always making choices. Yeah. So if that kind of like choice anxiety is getting at you, you're just never going to be good.
Man, that's a great point. It's almost like the choice and how you feel about the choice are two separate things. Like, make the choice, but know that the result of the choice I need to be content with no matter what. That's a really good perspective to have. Separating kind of like your level of contentment in the present moment from the anxiety of choosing whatever decision, door path.
And we're all just on a journey. I mean, we need to be able to look back at your life and, go through your photo album or whatever and be like, oh man, I remember when I was at the zoo and I was at this party and I was at this show and I was wherever I was, and you need to be like, oh yeah, all that stuff was cool.
Yeah.
But like, and also enjoy it in the moment too, but just be fine with that's what it was that we did. You can't look back and be like, oh my God, look at all these photos of me drinking every night at the same bar. Like, this was such a mistake. Like 6 years have gone by and I didn't have a good time ever.
Man. What a great point. Dude, thank you for doing the episode today.
Yeah,
I had a lot
for
of
sure.
fun.
I hope it didn't end on too dark of a note.
No, I thought it was really insightful. I don't know. Nothing you said made me feel dark. I think even the stuff you said that could have been heavier, you were like, listen, this is something dark that I learned from, and here's how I'm using it to make a better today.
Well, good.
I really liked it.
Thank you, Cody.
Evan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And we have a show together tonight.
That's crazy.
Which is gonna be
I hope we
awesome.
both enjoy it in the moment.
Yes, and look back 6 years from now and are like, I remember this picture. That was a great time.
Yeah, we got to get a pic.
Yeah, you're like, can't believe Cody's in prison now.
That's
shocked by
crazy. Dude, that was, oh man. We can't put that out in the universe.
I can't believe they caught him. I thought he was covering his trail. That's really, he shouldn't have stole that money. That's great.
Man.
Man, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We'll catch you on the next episode, folks.
See you guys.